Nadia Patel stared through the crystalline windows of the transport pod as it ascended through Earth's atmosphere. At 12 years old, she hadn't expected to be the first human student accepted into the Celestial Academy of Advanced Sciences. The acceptance letter had arrived 3 weeks ago, delivered by a hovering drone that transformed into an origami crane before her eyes. The pod's interior hummed with a gentle vibration as it breached the thermosphere. Nadia clutched her worn physics textbook closer to her chest, its familiar weight offering little comfort against the butterflies in her stomach. Her reflection in the window showed a girl with warm brown skin, dark curly hair tied back in a practical ponytail, and eyes that couldn't quite hide their uncertainty behind thick-rimmed glasses. Approaching CAA's orbital station, announced the pod's AI in a melodious tone. Please prepare for docking sequence. The massive structure of the Celestial Academy came into view, a marvel of alien architecture that resembled a giant snowflake made of iridescent metal and living crystal. Each branch housed different departments, and streams of transport pods moved between them like cosmic fireflies. As her pod docked at the main reception area, Nadia took a deep breath and straightened her academy uniform. A deep blue jumpsuit with silver trim that adapted to maintain perfect temperature. The door dissolved into particles of light, and she stepped into her new world. Professor Zurichs waited at the reception platform, their crystalline form shifting through subtle shades of blue and green. Like all Lumerians, they had no fixed shape, instead existing as a loosely humanoid collection of geometric patterns held together by conscious thought. Student Patel, Professor Zurichs' voice resonated directly in Nadia's mind, a common method of communication among advanced species. Welcome to CAAS. I trust your journey was acceptable. Yes, Professor, Nadia replied, trying to keep her voice steady. Thank you for having me. Having you. Geometric patterns rippled through Zurichs' form in what Nadia would later learn was amusement. You are here because your test results indicated potential, nothing more. Whether that potential manifests into actual ability remains to be seen. Nadia nodded, swallowing hard. She had scored higher on the universal aptitude test than any human before her, but she knew that meant little compared to the achievements of alien students who had been studying quantum mechanics since their equivalent of kindergarten. As they walked through the academy's main corridor, Nadia couldn't help but stare. Students of various species moved about their business, some floating, others walking on multiple legs, and a few existing as pure energy constructs. The walls themselves seemed alive, shifting and flowing to create new pathways as needed. Your first class begins in 17 minutes, Professor Zurichs announced. Quantum fundamentals in Laboratory Delta 7. Do not be late. With that, they dissolved into a shower of light particles and disappeared. Nadia checked her academy-issued holomap and started walking. She had memorized the basic layout during her preparation, but the reality was far more complex. The corridors seemed to respond to the collective consciousness of the students, creating optimal paths for traffic flow. She arrived at Laboratory Delta 7 with 2 minutes to spare. The classroom was a spherical chamber with floating platforms instead of desks. Students of various species were already settling into their positions. A young Valorian with iridescent scales nodded at her briefly before returning to their quantum tablet. Professor Zurichs materialized at the center of the room, their crystalline form now a deep purple. Today, they announced, we will discuss the fundamental principles of quantum entanglement and their practical applications in interstellar communication. The professor waved their hand, and a complex holographic model appeared in the air. Can anyone explain why quantum entanglement cannot be used for faster-than-light information transfer? Several appendages and energy tendrils rose into the air. Nadia hesitated, then raised her hand as well. Professor Zurichs' patterns shifted slightly. The human student. Enlighten us. Nadia stood, her heart pounding. While entangled particles can affect each other instantaneously across any distance, we can't use them to transmit information because measuring one particle breaks the entanglement. The no-cloning theorem prevents us from copying quantum states, so we can't create multiple entangled pairs with the same information. Any attempt to force information through entanglement results in random noise. The room fell silent. Professor Zyrix's form pulsed with an intense blue light. "Correct," they said finally. "Though I note you used simplified terminology. I can explain it using quantum field theory if you prefer," Nadia offered, surprising herself with her boldness. A ripple of what might have been surprise passed through Zyrix's crystalline structure. "That won't be necessary. However, since you seem so well versed in quantum mechanics, perhaps you'd like to demonstrate the practical exercise." Nadia nodded, even as her stomach tightened with anxiety. The professor gestured, and a complex apparatus materialized on her platform. It consisted of a series of crystalline chambers connected by streams of light. "Create a stable quantum bridge between chambers A and B," Professor Zyrix instructed. "You have 5 minutes." The other students watched with varying degrees of interest as Nadia examined the apparatus. She recognized the basic principles from her studies, but the alien technology was far more advanced than anything she had seen on Earth. Taking a deep breath, she began adjusting the quantum fields, her fingers moving through the holographic controls with careful precision. The streams of light between the chambers pulsed and shifted, responding to her commands. With 30 seconds remaining, Nadia made the final adjustment. The light between the chambers stabilized into a perfect quantum bridge, its efficiency reading at 99.97%, higher than the expected baseline. Professor Zyrix floated closer, their crystalline form analyzing the results. "Interesting," they said finally. "It seems humans are capable of more precise quantum manipulation than previously documented. Though one successful exercise hardly proves long-term potential." As the class ended, Nadia gathered her materials, her mind already racing with questions about the advanced technology she had just used. A small group of alien students watched her with what she hoped was curiosity rather than hostility. "Your technique was unusual," said the Valorian student who had nodded to her earlier, "but effective." Nadia smiled tentatively. "Thanks. I'm Nadia." "Vex 427, they replied. "Though you may call me Vex. Perhaps we could discuss quantum field harmonics during the nutrition break." As Nadia followed her new acquaintance toward the Academy's dining hall, she felt a small spark of hope. Maybe she could find her place here after all, even if she had to prove herself every step of the way. 2 weeks into her studies at the Celestial Academy, Nadia found herself facing the most challenging experiment yet. Laboratory Omega-3 hummed with energy as Professor Zyrix explained the day's task to the assembled students. "Today, we attempt quantum resonance visualization." The professor's crystalline form shimmered with deep purples and blues. "You will each receive a containment field containing quantum particles in various states of superposition. Your task is to observe and document their wave functions without causing collapse." A collective murmur rippled through the class. Even Vex, normally unflappable, shifted uncomfortably on their iridescent scales. "Professor," they said, raising a scaled appendage, "current theory suggests direct observation without collapse is impossible." "Correct," Professor Zyrix responded, geometric patterns flowing through their form. "Which is why this exercise will demonstrate the limitations of your current understanding." Nadia studied the containment field that materialized before her. Unlike the other students' fields, which glowed with various colors, hers seemed almost dim, barely visible in the laboratory's ambient light. She raised her hand. "Yes, Student Patil." Professor Zyrix's tone carried a hint of resignation, as if expecting another human question they'd need to simplify. "My containment field appears to be malfunctioning," Nadia said. "The quantum activity is barely registrable." The professor floated closer, their crystalline structure analyzing her setup. "The field is functioning precisely as intended. Perhaps your human sensory limitations are interfering with proper observation." Several students chittered or hummed in what might have been amusement. Nadia felt her cheeks warm but kept her focus on the field before her. Something about the particle's movement caught her attention, a pattern so subtle it seemed to exist at the edge of perception. Without thinking, she reached out toward the field. Multiple voices called out in alarm. Touching a quantum containment field was strictly forbidden. But before anyone could stop her, her fingers made contact with the energy barrier. The world shifted. Instead of the expected shock or dissolution of the field, Nadia found herself experiencing something impossible. She could see the quantum particles, not with her eyes, but with some other sense she hadn't known she possessed. They weren't just points of probability. They were dancing, weaving patterns of possibility through multiple dimensions. Fascinating, she whispered, unaware she was speaking aloud. They're not just existing in superposition, they're actively communicating across quantum states. The wave functions aren't collapsing because they're part of a larger metaconsciousness. The laboratory had fallen completely silent. Through her newfound perception, Nadia could feel the attention of every being in the room focused on her. She carefully withdrew her hand from the field, and regular reality snapped back into focus. Professor Zurich's had moved so close that their crystalline form loomed over her platform. Their usual shifting patterns had frozen in what might have been shock. "Explain," they demanded, their mental voice resonating with an intensity Nadia had never heard before. "The particles," Nadia said, trying to put the experience into words. "They're not just existing in quantum states. They're aware of them. They're choosing which states to occupy based on a complex network of interactions that extends beyond our normal space-time reference frame." "Impossible," declared a Meridian student, their energy form flickering with agitation. "No organic being can directly perceive quantum states." And yet, Professor Zurich's form had begun moving again, patterns shifting rapidly through colors Nadia had never seen them display before. She has described exactly what is occurring in the containment field, a phenomenon that, until now, only our most advanced quantum computers could detect. The professor turned to address the class, their mental voice carrying an unusual edge of excitement. "End today's exercise. Student Patel, you will remain. The rest of you are dismissed." As the other students filed out, some casting curious or concerned glances her way, Nadia remained at her station. Vex paused briefly at the door, their scales shifting through patterns that Nadia had learned indicated worry. Once the laboratory was empty, Professor Zurich's form settled into a more stable configuration. "What you just demonstrated," they began, "is theoretically impossible. Human neural structures should not be capable of quantum perception at that level." "I don't understand what happened," Nadia admitted. "It was like suddenly being able to see a new color or hear a new kind of music. The particles weren't just there, they were alive. In a way." "Indeed." The professor's patterns shifted thoughtfully. "It seems we have significantly underestimated human potential. Or perhaps—" They paused, geometric shapes realigning. "Perhaps you represent something unique." Nadia frowned. "You mean I'm some kind of mutation?" "I mean," Professor Zurich's corrected, "that you may be the first of your kind to demonstrate this ability. The implications are substantial." They gestured, and a series of complex diagnostic tools materialized around Nadia's platform. "With your permission, I would like to conduct some additional tests." The rest of the afternoon passed in a blur of increasingly complex quantum interactions. Each time, Nadia found she could perceive and interact with quantum states in ways that, according to everything she had studied, should have been impossible. As the Academy's artificial day cycle began to dim, Professor Zurich's finally called a halt to the tests. Their crystalline form had settled into a deep, thoughtful blue. "I must consult with the Academy Council," they announced. "This discovery requires careful consideration. Until then, speak of this to no one." Nadia nodded, exhausted but exhilarated. As she gathered her things to leave, the professor added something unexpected. "Well done, Student Patel. It seems humanity may have more to teach us than we anticipated." Walking back to her quarters, Nadia felt different. Not just tired, but somehow more aware of the world around her. The Academy's living walls seemed to pulse with quantum potential, and she could almost perceive the complex dance of particles that made up every object and being she passed. What she didn't notice, however, were the subtle distortions beginning to appear in the fabric of space-time around her, like ripples spreading out from a stone dropped in a cosmic pond. Her newfound ability had changed something fundamental in the universe's quantum machinery, and the consequences were only beginning to unfold. The first sign that something was wrong came during breakfast in the Academy's main dining hall. Nadia was discussing quantum harmonics with Vex when the artificial gravity flickered. For a brief moment, everything in the hall, food, drinks, students, floated upward before crashing back down. A minor malfunction, announced the Academy's AI system, quantum core stabilizing. But Nadia felt it, a wrongness in the quantum fabric of space around them, like a song played slightly out of tune, or a picture hanging crooked on a wall. She caught Professor Zerix watching her from across the hall, their crystalline form pulsing with concerned patterns. "Nadia." Vex's scales shifted with worry. "Your vital signs are fluctuating." Before she could respond, alarms began blaring throughout the Academy. Not the usual soft tones that indicated class changes or minor issues, but harsh, urgent sounds that made the living walls vibrate with anxiety. Professor Zerix materialized beside their table. "All students report to designated safety zones immediately." Their mental voice carried an edge Nadia had never heard before. "Except you, Student Patel. Come with me." As other students hurried from the hall, Zerix led Nadia to a restricted section of the Academy she had never seen before. The walls here were different, darker, more densely packed with quantum machinery. They entered a circular chamber filled with holographic displays and monitoring equipment. The Academy Council was waiting for them. 7 beings of various species, each radiating power and authority. At the center of the chamber, a holographic representation showed the Academy and the space around it. Dark distortions were spreading through the local space-time fabric like cracks in glass. "It's worse than we feared," said Council Member Xerath, an energy being composed of swirling plasma. "The quantum anomalies are expanding exponentially." "And the cause?" asked another council member, their form shifting between states of matter. All eyes turned to Nadia. Professor Zerix moved protectively closer. "Student Patel's ability to perceive quantum states has interacted with reality in unexpected ways." "Unexpected?" Zerith's plasma form flared. "She has created quantum entanglement cascades that threaten the very fabric of local spacetime. The Academy's containment fields are already failing." As if to emphasize the point, reality rippled around them. Nadia felt it like a wave of nausea, probability functions collapsing and reforming in chaotic patterns. Through her newfound senses, she could see the damage spreading. "I can fix it," she said suddenly, surprising herself and everyone else in the chamber. "Impossible," declared one council member. "Even our most advanced quantum engineers cannot repair spacetime distortions of this magnitude." But Professor Zerix's patterns shifted thoughtfully. "Perhaps Student Patel's unique perception might offer a solution we cannot see." Another reality ripple shook the chamber, stronger this time. Equipment sparked and failed. The holographic displays flickered wildly. "We have no choice," Zerix continued. "Conventional containment is failing. If these anomalies continue to expand, they will eventually reach Earth." The mention of her home planet strengthened Nadia's resolve. "The quantum particles, they respond to me. If I can understand the pattern of the distortions, maybe I can guide them back to stability." The council members conferred in rapid, multidimensional communication. Finally, Girith spoke. "We authorize the attempt, but be warned. If you fail, the consequences will be catastrophic." Professor Zerix led Nadia to a quantum interface platform in the center of the chamber. "Focus your perception on the anomalies," they instructed. "But be careful. Direct interaction with quantum distortions of this magnitude could be dangerous." Nadia stepped onto the platform and closed her eyes. Her awareness expanded, and suddenly she could see everything. The complex quantum dance of reality itself, now spinning out of control. The anomalies were like wounds in spacetime, bleeding probability and chaos. But there was something else, a pattern in the chaos, a rhythm she recognized. The quantum particles weren't just moving randomly. They were trying to restore balance, but their efforts were uncoordinated, creating more distortions instead of fixing them. "They need a conductor," she whispered. "Like an orchestra. All the instruments are playing, but they need someone to bring them together." Without waiting for permission, Nadia reached out with her mind and touched the nearest anomaly. Pain shot through her body as raw quantum energy flooded her consciousness. But she held on, using her perception to understand the flow of particles. "Remarkable," she heard Professor Zurich say, their voice seeming to come from very far away. "She's actually stabilizing the quantum field." Nadia didn't respond. She was too focused on the task at hand, guiding the quantum particles like a conductor guiding musicians. Gradually, the chaotic energy began to smooth out, finding harmony instead of discord. But something was fighting back. A dark knot of quantum instability that refused to be tamed. As Nadia pushed harder, trying to reach it, she felt her consciousness starting to fragment. "Her neural patterns are destabilizing," someone warned. "We must stop this." "No," Nadia gasped. "Almost. There." She pushed deeper into the quantum realm, her awareness stretching to its limits. The resistant anomaly fought back, sending waves of chaos through reality. But Nadia had found something stronger than chaos. She had found the underlying pattern, the fundamental rhythm of spacetime itself. With the last of her strength, she reached out to the quantum particles and showed them the pattern. Like a key fitting into a lock, everything clicked into place. The anomalies began to collapse, reality reknitting itself into proper order. When Nadia opened her eyes, she was lying on the platform, Professor Zurich's crystalline form hovering over her anxiously. The holographic displays showed clear, stable space around the academy. "You did it," Zurich said, their mental voice warm with what might have been pride. "Though I strongly advise against attempting anything like that again without proper preparation." The council members were conferring again, their communication tinged with what Nadia sensed was a mixture of relief and concern. Finally, Zurich addressed her directly. "It seems we must reevaluate our understanding of human potential, and perhaps, the energy being paused meaningfully, our methods of teaching it." In the days following the quantum crisis, the Celestial Academy hummed with change. Nadia noticed it in small ways at first, the curious glances from students who had previously ignored her, the respectful distance maintained by others who seemed unsure whether to treat her as peer or phenomenon. The biggest change came in her training. The Academy Council had assigned her a private laboratory, where Professor Zurich now conducted specialized sessions to help her understand and control her unique abilities. "Focus," Zurich instructed, their crystalline form glowing softly as they monitored Nadia's attempts to manipulate a complex quantum matrix. "You've proven you can interact with quantum states. Now you must learn precision." Nadia concentrated on the shifting patterns before her. Since the crisis, her quantum perception had grown stronger, but control remained challenging. The particles responded to her touch like eager puppies, enthusiastic but unpredictable. "I can sense them all," she said, "but it's like trying to conduct 1,000 orchestras at once. Each particle has its own rhythm, its own preferences." "Precisely." Zurich's patterns shifted thoughtfully, "which is why we must proceed carefully. Your ability to communicate with quantum particles is unprecedented. We cannot risk another cascade of anomalies." A soft chime interrupted them. Another council member, Zurich, had arrived. Their plasma form swirled with barely contained energy as they observed Nadia's practice. "The council requires an update on student Patul's progress," Zurich announced, their tone neutral but carrying an undercurrent of tension. "She advances steadily," Professor Zurich replied. "Her control improves daily." "Demonstrate," Xereth commanded, gesturing to a sealed quantum containment vessel they had brought. Inside, particles chaos danced in obvious distress. Nadia approached cautiously. Through her quantum sense, she could feel the particles' agitation. "They're afraid," she said without thinking. Something disrupted their natural patterns. "Impossible," Xereth stated. "Quantum particles do not experience emotion. They simply exist in probability states." But Nadia wasn't listening. She reached out to the troubled particles, not with her hands but with her consciousness. "It's okay," she whispered, though she knew they didn't perceive sound as she did. Instead, she projected feelings of calm and harmony. The chaos dance slowly settled into a more orderly pattern. The particles began to pulse in synchronization, their quantum states aligning naturally rather than through forced containment. "Remarkable," Xereth admitted, their plasma form flickering with what might have been surprise, but also concerning. "The implications of quantum particles responding to emotional input are fascinating," Professor Xerix interrupted, their crystalline structure shifting protectively closer to Nadia, "and potentially revolutionary for our understanding of quantum mechanics." "Or dangerous," Xereth countered. "The Council has received complaints from several faculty members. They believe her presence disrupts the natural order of the Academy." "The natural order already changed," Nadia said quietly, but with conviction. "We can either understand it or ignore it, but it won't go back to how it was." Both aliens turned to look at her, Xereth with surprise, Xerix with what she had learned to recognize as approval. The professor's patterns shifted to a deep, resonant blue. "Indeed," Xerix agreed. "Perhaps it is time we considered a more integrated approach to student Patul's training." "Explain," Xereth demanded. "Until now, we have treated her ability as something to be contained and controlled. But what if we viewed it instead as a bridge? A new way of understanding the relationship between consciousness and quantum reality?" The discussion was interrupted by another chime, this one urgent. A holographic display materialized, showing readings from the Academy's quantum core. Subtle distortions were appearing again, but different from before. "It's not me," Nadia said quickly, sensing the particles' patterns. "This is something else." "Something." She frowned, concentrating harder. "Something artificial." Xereth's plasma form crackled with alarm. "Impossible. Our security systems are based on our previous understanding of quantum mechanics," Xerix finished. "Which student Patul has proven incomplete." The distortions were growing stronger. Through her quantum sense, Nadia could feel them taking shape. Not chaos this time, but purposeful manipulation. Someone or something was trying to force their way into the Academy's quantum infrastructure. "They're trying to hack the quantum core," she realized. "But they don't understand how to communicate with the particles properly. They're hurting them." Without waiting for permission, she extended her awareness toward the quantum core. The particles there recognized her, responding to her presence like flowers turning toward the sun. Through them, she could sense the intrusion more clearly. "There," she said, pointing to a pattern that felt wrong. "Mechanical and forced rather than natural. They're using some kind of quantum tunneling device to bypass the security protocols." Professor Xerix's form pulsed with urgent colors. "Can you stop them?" Nadia nodded slowly, already reaching out to the quantum particles being manipulated by the intruders. Instead of fighting against the foreign patterns, she began to work with them, showing the particles how to retain their natural harmony while redirecting the intrusive energy. "Fascinating," she heard Xereth murmur. "She's not merely blocking the attack, she's reshaping the quantum field itself." The intruders' attempts grew more aggressive, but Nadia held firm. She could feel them trying to force connections, but the particles now moved in concert with her, maintaining their patterns while rendering the attacks harmless. Finally, the foreign presence withdrew, leaving behind only fading ripples in the quantum field. Nadia opened her eyes, suddenly aware of how quiet the laboratory had become. "Well," Professor Xerix said after a moment, their patterns shifting through colors Nadia had never seen before, I believe this demonstrates the value of a more integrated approach to your training. Tirith's plasma form had settled into a thoughtful swirl. Perhaps, they conceded. But it also raises new questions. Who would attempt to breach our quantum security? And why now? Nadia felt a chill as she considered the implications. Her unique ability to communicate with quantum particles had changed more than just the Academy's understanding of physics. It had exposed vulnerabilities no one had known existed. I think, she said slowly, we need to prepare for the possibility that I'm not the only one who's discovered new ways of interacting with quantum reality. The Academy's central chamber buzzed with tension as representatives from across the galaxy gathered for an emergency session. 3 months had passed since the attempted quantum breach, and everything had changed. Nadia stood beside Professor Zirix, watching as beings of all species filed in, their attention fixed on the quantum visualization display at the chamber center. "Are you ready?" Zirix asked, their crystalline form shifting with concerned patterns. Nadia nodded, though her heart raced. They need to understand. All of them. The attempted breach hadn't been an isolated incident. Similar attacks had been reported at quantum research facilities across the galaxy. Someone was systematically probing the boundaries between consciousness and quantum reality, using methods that echoed Nadia's abilities, but lacked her natural harmony with the particles. "The Council recognizes student Nadia Patel," announced Zirith, their plasma form commanding attention. "She has discovered something that concerns us all." Nadia stepped forward, feeling the weight of countless alien gazes. The quantum display responded to her presence, particles swirling in elegant patterns that reflected her calm determination. 3 months ago, she began, we discovered that quantum particles aren't just probability functions. They're aware. They respond to consciousness in ways we never imagined. But that discovery came with a price. She gestured, and the display showed recordings of the recent attacks, quantum systems being forcibly manipulated, particles struggling against unnatural patterns. Someone is trying to weaponize this knowledge. They're attempting to force quantum consciousness into submission rather than working in harmony with it. Murmurs rippled through the chamber. A Meridian representative spoke up, their energy form flickering with concern. "How can we defend against such attacks?" "We can't," Nadia said simply. "Not with barriers or containment fields. The quantum realm doesn't work that way. But we can learn to communicate with it properly." She reached out to the quantum particles in the display, not controlling them but inviting them to dance. The patterns they created were beautiful, complex geometries that spoke of natural harmony and infinite possibility. "The particles want to interact with us," she explained. "They've been trying to for millennia, but we've been too focused on controlling them to notice. Every quantum system in the galaxy is connected, sharing information and consciousness in ways we're only beginning to understand." Professor Zirix moved forward, their patterns supporting her words. "Student Patel has proven that human consciousness can bridge the gap between classical and quantum reality. But more importantly, she has shown us that this ability isn't unique to humans or any other species. It's a potential we all share." "A dangerous potential," argued another council member, "if this knowledge spreads." "It already has," Nadia interrupted. "The attackers proved that. We can either learn to use it responsibly or watch it be abused." She turned to address the entire chamber. "I'm proposing a new kind of quantum education. Not just formulas and containment protocols, but real communication. Every species here has something unique to offer, different ways of perceiving and interacting with quantum reality." The quantum display erupted with light as particles responded to her passion, creating patterns that reflected the diverse consciousness gathered in the chamber. Several beings gasped as they felt, perhaps for the first time, the subtle response of quantum particles to their own awareness. "The Academy was founded to share knowledge across species," Nadia continued, "to learn from each other's differences rather than fear them. This is our chance to prove that principle wasn't just words." Zirith's plasma form swirled thoughtfully. "You suggest we completely revolutionize our understanding of quantum mechanics," Change millennia of established teaching. I suggest we evolve it, Nadia corrected. The quantum realm has been trying to show us something amazing, and we've been too afraid to look. But we can't afford that fear anymore. She gestured again, and the quantum display showed a simulation of her proposal, a new curriculum that combined traditional quantum mechanics with consciousness-based interaction. We can learn to work with quantum reality rather than against it. Create defenses that don't rely on force but on harmony. Professor Zarich's patterns shifted to deep, resonant blues. The human student speaks wisdom beyond her years. Her presence here has already changed us. Perhaps it is time we embraced that change. The chamber erupted in discussion, countless alien minds grappling with implications that would reshape their understanding of the universe. But Nadia wasn't finished. She had one more demonstration planned. "Watch," she said softly, reaching out to the quantum particles with everything she had learned. The display exploded with light and color, but this time every being in the chamber felt it. A direct connection to the quantum consciousness that permeated reality. For one breathtaking moment, they all shared the same perception, the infinite dance of particles, the subtle harmonies of space-time, the vast potential that had always existed just beyond their awareness. When it ended, the chamber was silent with awe. "That," Nadia said into the silence, "is what we've been missing. Not just humans, not just the Academy, but every species that ever looked at quantum mechanics and saw only mathematics instead of magic." She turned to face the council directly. "I'm not special. I just happened to listen when the particles were trying to speak. Now they're speaking to all of us. The question is, are we ready to answer?" One by one, the representatives began to signal agreement. Even those who had been most skeptical couldn't deny what they had felt. The quantum realm had changed from an abstract concept to a living reality, and there was no going back. "It seems," Gutierrez said finally, their plasma form glowing with new understanding, "that the galaxy's youngest species has become its most important teacher." Professor Zarich's patterns shifted to colors of pride and joy. "No," they corrected. "She has simply reminded us of what we should have known all along, that the universe holds more wonders than any single species can comprehend alone." As the chamber buzzed with plans for implementation, Nadia felt the quantum particles swirling around her in celebration. She had done more than save the Academy or advance quantum science. She had helped bridge the gap between consciousness and reality, between different species and ways of thinking. The universe, she realized, would never be quite the same. And that was exactly as it should be.